1395, Adelaide's FIVEaa. This is Richard Pascoe.
And it's 3 o'clock here on 5AA. Remember, give me a call, 8223 0000. We're on the home run now into the last hour. Getting a ton of text messages in, which we're going to go through very shortly. But we know you're listening. Give us a call. And to the following people who we've got Alice, Molly, Michael and Julianne. I'm on air at the moment. I can't respond to your phone calls. Good heavens. Steve Davis, what do you think about all of that? Is my life disorganised or what?
Look, I think that's a bit harsh, but I will say that your friends' lives are disorganised if they're trying to ring you while you're on air.
Yes.
I think there's your litmus test.
Yeah,
I think they have to go on a short list of being pushed to the back of the queue.
It's exactly right. Steve, what are we going to discuss today?
Well, you had a good idea this week. You said, Steve, instead of doing a story, let's just maybe talk about some sort of small business tip as something a little bit different to shake things up. And I've got something that, well, I think it's in that realm, but it's not what you're probably expecting, okay?
No, it's fine.
It's actually a little hack that I shared recently. David Olney, my colleague, talked about marketing. We do a really short fortnightly podcast called Talking About Marketing, and one of the segments we do in it isn't just on marketing, it's actually on the small business owner themselves. How can they keep themselves, running well? Because when you're at the top of the tree running a business, there's no one to look after you. You've got to do it yourself.
You're spot on, Steve.
Yep, and the thing I've noticed, you would know this too, oh my goodness, there is so much stress out there in small business land at the moment. I was on the front porch of a client midweek, and she is stressed to the eyeballs in her industry in particular, and just trying to get that breathing space. So this is why we do this. Now, you've got, trouble finding staff and keeping staff at the moment. It's a really tough environment out there. Depending on your industry, the big end of town, if they need to just dump stock, they dump it, and suddenly you can't compete on price. This particular person's in the wine industry, and they are really getting it because the big end of town has got a glut because China being closed down. And so it's just tough. Swings and roundabouts. You got all that. That's just normal business. What happens when someone has shafted you? What do you do when someone has gone out of their way to just knife you, steal from you, whatever? I think we've all been there from time to time.
Yep.
Am I right?
Yes, yes, you are, Steve.
Yes. So this is where I just shared a little hack that comes from a philosophy called Stoicism, which is like 2,000 years old. So, and when I shared this, I actually got quite a lot of good feedback from small business people. So I thought I'd share it here. It actually can help just deal with toxicity in your life, whether you're in a business or not. Because the one thing we can't afford running a business is, let's say you have been shafted and you're now bitter, but you've still got to front up and smile for your next customer. And sometimes you just don't have the energy to do that. And so
you don't. You don't sometimes.
No, you don't. So, and just like I'm sure the manager at FIVEaa said what the manager at FIVEemu said to me when I started, if you're feeling crappy, people don't want to know that. That's not what they're tuning in for. So there is a bit of theatre. There is a bit of, making sure you perform well. Yeah. However, if you have been, you're still really sore, you're going to have a really dour way of being. So you can't go on like that. So here is a hack. I've done it myself, and it's really changed my perception of the people who did the bad things to me so I could take that weight off. So without further ado, Stoicism, one quick bit of background. It was a philosophy, the Greeks started it, the Romans, I think, really perfected it. And it hinges on what you can do to try and be as happy as possible for as much as you can. And they discern there are two things that are going to affect you being happy. One, bad things that happen that you can control. So, for example, you've got to go out in the rain to do some work. What do you do? Throw a raincoat on, or, just do something, toughen up, which you're often, you've said to me a few times, go on, Steve, harden up, have that concrete, just get out there. Just get out there, embrace it,
Yep.
and get the job done. And in fact, a cheerio to Ash Sinclair, if he's listening today, he used to train me at Inform Health many years ago. He was a former SAS guy. We were doing boxing one day, and he said, here's something that you people who don't have a fighting history don't realise. If you get yourself into a fight, just expect to be hit and expect it to hurt.
Geez, cheerful bloke.
He was. But it was really interesting because his point was, if you live in this la-la land of optimism all the time, when you do get hurt, you're so shocked that you drop your guard and the other person can take control. So there you go, just a throwback from many years ago. So that's one thing. But there are also things that happen to us over which we have no control. And what the Stoics did there was say, well, train yourself for it. So, for example, we've got summer about to hit us, and it always does in a really big way. The winter this year was hideous. So what a Stoic would do is during the cold spell, they would choose a day when they don't wear a jumper, and they just toughen themselves up to cope so that when it is a cold day and the power's out or you're stuck outside or whatever, you don't fall apart and crumble. So they're basically making us tougher to be more resilient. So that's the background. But here's the hack that I hope people find valuable. It's a professor from America, Professor William B. Irvine. He is a philosopher, and he teaches an attitude when bad things happen to you of rethinking about it as a test from the old ancient Stoic gods up in the sky. Now, he knows there's no such thing, so you just have, this is theatre. You imagine that this bad thing that's happening to you right now, some of these, think of these, fantastic, superhero gods up in there, they are doing their best to test you. And he said, when you actually reframe what you're going through that way, it really changes it, especially when, and this is the clincher, you think of the person who's doing the act as just some lackey. Just some lackey the gods have used to do this bad thing against you. So they're no longer powerful. They're no longer the big sinister mastermind. They're just a bum who's been picked up off the street and being used by the gods to give you this test. And as far-fetched as this sounds, can I just suggest that if you have got something festering away in your head at the moment of a person in particular who has been really horrid to you, start thinking that, just see if your imagination can do this, because I've certainly had that experience. And when I applied this, it is amazing, Richard. Like they became nothing. Instead of, you know how you sort of quiet down and these people sort of jump into your memory, it just dismissed them. You just go, oh yeah, little lackey. Like, you take away their power and you sort of clean the slate. So it's not what you might call a standard business tip, but I've had a lot of people in business go, you know what, that was really helpful. It's not my idea. I'm just passing on from Professor Irvine, but it's one of those places where someone in the world of philosophy has actually applied philosophy to the real world, and it has made a real change. So,
we do get people in our lives in small business, and things don't go right all the time. Or,
no, they don't.
Or it's, demands are placed upon you, for it, and you just think, well, do I really have to do this sometimes? Mm-hmm. And not that I've ever thought that, but, I had somebody, ring me this morning and insist that and I'm sitting here at FIVEaa an hour to go.
Yeah.
I need you here to do this now. And I don't know them as a client. I said, well, earliest I can get to you is Monday. Well, that's just not good enough. And they hung up. It's just, did my best, tried to offer you something on Monday, you didn't want it.
So imagine this. Imagine you instead hung up the phone and you just look up in the sky and you go, yeah, good one, to these Stoic gods. Yep, nice try. Didn't work. Try again. It seems bizarre, but it really just takes away the potential toxin or poison of that human and the residue that just sticks around your brain and nags at you if you don't get it dealt with in some way.
And not all business owners are happy 100% of the time.
Well, they're not, but that's part of what we sign up for when we do have a business. Is business is about, or marketing in particular, is about the provision of a service of some value from one entity to another, and everything you do is your brand. It's how you're talked about, and so you don't want to be talked about from that bad day you had. There is I can't get the wording right at the moment, but basically the way you're perceived in the world is as good as either your worst day or the worst day of your person who's running your cash register and having a really bad day themselves. They say the people at the front line of a business can destroy it much more quickly than some of the managers up the top, because you get someone who's got a really bad experience and they might have caught you on a really bad day when you're a bit grumpy, and that's how they then talk about you at the barbecue that night. And then when someone else says, "Oh, who do we say?" "Oh, no, don't go there." And so it's tough.
Yeah, the guy was in a bad mood. He didn't want to, know me, or all of that. And we always try and go along and we try and be happy for people 99% of the time. But sometimes, we in business, and I've been guilty of it. Sometimes we do have bad days. Great tip. Looking forward to talking to you next weekend, Steve. How do people find you, and what do you do?
Look, I run a little marketing consultancy. It's called Talked About Marketing. And and as part of that, with David Olney, we do that little half-hour fortnightly podcast called Talking About Marketing, with lots of stories like the one I just shared today.
Thanks, Steve.